The UK property market is under attack and the rules are changing fast. If you own property, invest in property, or even rent, this affects you. Labour's Renters' Rights Bill was already set to cripple landlords, spike rents, and reshape the housing market forever. But now the House of Lords have stepped in with major amendments to the bill. Some of these changes soften the blow for landlords, while others actually tighten restrictions even further. Either way, this is critical information that's only just been released that you need to know right now. But why should you listen to me? Well, since 2013, I've built a UK-wide home buying company, British Home Buyers, and a nationwide estate agency, British Home Sellers, that's handled over 14,000 property transactions worth over £4.2 billion. I've seen government policies claim to help tenants only to drive landlords out, shrink supply, and push rents up even higher. This time it could be even worse. Let's get into the 7 policies that will change UK property forever in 2025. The first is the end of fixed term tenancies, or is it? Right now, most rental contracts are fixed for 6 or 12 months, giving landlords certainty that someone is legally tied to paying a set amount of rent each month. Under the original Renters' Rights Bill, all fixed term tenancies would have been abolished. Every tenancy would automatically have become periodic, meaning tenants could leave at any time with just 2 months' notice. No long-term commitment required. But why would this have been a big deal? For tenants, this seemed like a huge win. You can move in, and if you don't like the property or the landlord isn't maintaining it, you can leave easily. Life circumstances change, no problem. Just give 2 months' notice and walk away. No lengthy contracts. For landlords, however, this creates serious uncertainty. No guarantee of long-term rental income. A tenant could move in, stay a few months, and leave unexpectedly. You'll have more frequent void periods. If it's easier for tenants to move, they will move more often. And higher risk equals higher prices. Just like mobile phone contracts, short-term flexibility means businesses charge more to compensate, longer contracts, and you get cheaper deals. But what are the House of Lords changing? Well, fixed-term tenancies are back. The House of Lords did not fully agree with abolishing fixed-term tenancies, and they've tabled key amendments that soften the impact. Fixed-term tenancies up to 12 months will still be allowed, but only if both the landlord and tenant agrees. Student tenancies will be exempt from this, meaning landlords can still offer fixed-term student lets that align with the academic year. So while fixed-term tenancies won't be the norm anymore, landlords and tenants can still opt into them, which protects landlords from unnecessary instability. So what's this mean for landlords and tenants? Tenants still have more flexibility. Most tenancies will still be periodic by default. Landlords get some control back, but they still need to negotiate fixed terms up front. Student housing stays secure. Landlords can still offer academic year leases. The Lords have walked back the most extreme changes, which may prevent rents from rising too sharply due to increased landlord risk. But could this be reversed in the future? The second thing is rent increase limits. So what's changing with this? Under the original Renters' Rights Bill, landlords would only be able or allowed to increase rent once per year, and all increases have to go through a Section 13 process, meaning no pre-agreed rent hikes written into tenancy agreements would be allowed. The House of Lords, however, has introduced key amendments that actually tighten these controls even further and change how rent disputes will be handled. They've suggested stricter caps on rent increases. Previously, landlords could increase rent based on whatever the free market allowed. Now, under the Lords' amendments, rent increases within a tenancy cannot exceed the lower of either inflation since the last rent review or the percentage increase in median UK earnings over the last 3 years. This means landlords no longer have full control over setting rent to match market conditions. They're basically capped. They're locked into a strict formula that ensures rental growth is capped and can't rise above a certain, those two things. This cap applies for the first 4 years of any tenancy. After that, standard market adjustments may be allowed, but there are also changes to the rent tribunal process. The Renters' Rights Bill originally allowed tenants to challenge rent increases through a first-tier tribunal, where the tribunal could reduce rent if it was deemed too high, for instance. Here's what the House of Lords amendments change. The rent tribunal can no longer force rent reductions. So before, if a tribunal ruled the rent was too high, it could actually lower it. Now the Lords removed this rule, meaning the rent could stay the same but won't be automatically reduced. There'll also be no more retroactive refunds for overcharging. Before, if a tribunal ruled in favour of the tenant, the landlord had to refund them for past overpayments. Now that requirement has been removed. Landlords won't have to backdate refunds even if a rent increase is blocked. The next change is potential tribunal overload and government review. So the Lords have demanded a review of the tribunal system before these rules are actually allowed to be implemented. The Competition and Market Authority will also be tasked with investigating whether the new tribunal process is distorting the rental market. So why does this all matter for landlords? Well, firstly, more tenants may challenge rent increases. Since tenants now have nothing to lose by appealing, there's a risk that every rent increase will be challenged. Even fair increases could be delayed for months while cases go through this tribunal process. The second is landlords lose pricing flexibility. Since increases are now capped at inflation or wage growth, landlords can't respond to rising market rents. This could mean landlords start setting rents higher from the start, anticipating they won't be able to increase them as quickly later. And thirdly, tribunal backlogs could lead to delays. More cases mean a slower process, delaying rental income adjustments. This might discourage landlords from renting their properties long-term altogether. Most concerningly to landlords, does this pave the way for full rent controls? With strict rent increase caps, a tribunal-driven rent-setting process, and a government mechanism to oversee fair rent increases, the foundation is now in place for full-scale rent controls in the future. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't rent control yet, but the infrastructure in theory will be there for it, which means future governments could easily impose maximum rental increases per year, just like they do in Ireland, for example. So landlords versus tenants, who wins from this? Well, tenants benefit, rents are controlled, increases are challengeable, and backdated refunds are no longer a concern. The downside for landlords is you lose flexibility. They can't raise rents to match the market, and disputes could delay income adjustments. More tribunal cases could slow the system down, making renting out of properties less attractive for landlords. The House of Lords has fundamentally altered the Renters' Rights Bill, tightening controls, limiting rent increases, and making it easier for tenants to challenge landlords. This is one of the areas that the House of Lords has actually made things tougher for landlords. If you think this is the start of full rent controls in the UK, it'd be interesting to know your thoughts in the comments below. The third thing is the abolishing of Section 21 no-fault evictions, but now with key exemptions. Right now, landlords can legally regain possession of their property by serving a Section 21 notice, a crucial safety net that allows eviction without needing to prove any tenant wrongdoing. In 2025, this year, this will likely be banned under the Renters' Rights Bill, but the House of Lords has introduced major amendments to soften the impact, particularly for smaller landlords. So what was originally proposed? The original bill would have banned Section 21 completely. Landlords could no longer evict tenants without reason, therefore forcing landlords to rely on Section 8 evictions, which require proving specific grounds, so things like unpaid rent, selling the property, or antisocial behaviour, therefore making it harder and slower to regain possession of the property, since landlords would have to go through the already overwhelmed court system. For landlords, this is a major problem. Many feared tenants staying indefinitely, even if they stopped paying rent. long, costly eviction battles in court, and therefore more landlords selling up, further reducing rental supply. What the House of Lords has changed is small landlords with less than 5 properties can still use Section 21. So if you own fewer than 5 rental properties, you will still be able to issue Section 21 notices to regain possession. This amendment recognises that small landlords have fewer resources to handle legal disputes and long court processes, but stronger evidence requirements for evictions will be needed by those that have to go through Section 8. If a landlord claims they need the property back for sale or personal use, they must provide proof. This includes a statement of truth, and for sales, an engagement letter from a solicitor or estate agent dealing with the sale of the property. Failure to follow through could result in penalties, preventing landlords from evicting just to re-rent at a higher price. But importantly of all this, there will be a review of court resources before Section 21 ban ever takes effect. So the government must review whether courts can handle increased eviction cases before Section 21 is officially removed. This means the ban could be delayed until it's proven that the legal system can manage the extra workload. Also, there will be mandatory government reviews on how the eviction ban affects housing supply. So a yearly review must assess whether removing Section 21 is bettering or worsening rental availability, whether it's driving up rents or making landlords leave the market altogether, that then will dictate how policy changes in the future. So what's this mean for landlords and tenants? Smaller landlords get an exemption. If you own less or 5 properties, you can still use Section 21. Tenants in larger landlord-owned properties get more security, as big landlords won't be able to evict without a valid reason. It might mean that tenants prefer to deal with bigger landlords. Landlords must provide proof if they want to sell or move in themselves. They must show clear evidence. But court backlogs could delay evictions, but at least the government must review capacity for that before the ban is enforced. If the court system can't cope, in theory, none of this will come to pass. More landlords may sell if courts remain slow. Many landlords will still see this as too much risk, reducing rental supply. This softens the blow for smaller landlords while still making it harder for large portfolio landlords to evict without reason. The big question is, will this change strike the right balance, or will it still push landlords out of the market? For banning rental bidding wars, but will it backfire? One of the biggest changes in the Renters' Rights Bill is the ban on rental bidding wars, which stops landlords from accepting offers above the advertised rent price. Now, what was originally proposed was landlords must advertise a fixed rental price and cannot accept offers above that price, even if tenants are willing to pay more. The goal was to prevent competition from driving up rents, especially in high demand areas. Now, the problem with this is landlords set rents based on demand. If they can't negotiate higher offers, the solution is they'll probably just list properties at a higher starting price and accept rents below. This could increase rents overall instead of actually reducing them. What the House of Lords has changed is there will be no automatic ban on bidding wars. Government must first assess the impact. So the government must conduct a full review of how this policy will affect the rental market before enforcing it. This means that the ban may not take effect immediately, giving landlord and letting agents more time to adjust to if they do come into play. It will also need to include a tribunal review to avoid rent distortions. So the Competition and Market Authority will basically be tasked to evaluate whether fixed price advertising distorts the market. This is really aimed to ensure that setting strict rental prices doesn't reduce supply or make rents even less affordable by driving prices up. So if the review finds that banning bidding wars leads to rent hikes, the government may be forced to change or scrap the policy altogether. The Lords has ensured ban won't be rushed through without understanding the consequences of it. Will this policy work as intended? The Lords has ensured that before the ban takes effect, the government must assess its impact, which means the policy could still be adjusted or delayed or brought in and then removed. If rents rise because landlords list at higher prices, the government will probably be forced to scrap the idea altogether. 5, mandatory landlord registration and Ombudsman scheme. So what's changing is under the Renters' Rights Bill, all landlords must register on a new government database, and a new ombudsman will be created to handle tenant complaints, a bit like you have with estate agents selling properties now. And what was originally proposed is landlords must register their details and rental properties on this central database. And then a new ombudsman would mediate tenant disputes, even for landlords who use or don't use letting agents. Landlords will then be forced to pay fees to fund the system. So the problem with this is it obviously creates more red tape, more regulation, more costs. Small landlords might sell up rather than deal with the extra compliance of this. And then if landlords do exit, rental supply shrinks, and as a result, rents go up. What the House of Lords has changed is a redress scheme exemption for some landlords. So if a landlord already uses a letting agent who is part of an approved redress scheme, they won't need to join the new landlord ombudsman separately. So this reduces duplication and costs for some landlords. If you've got a letting agent, you don't then need to bother with this. The database will include landlord gas and electrical safety reports. The PRS database will also hold safety certificates, meaning landlords will need to upload their gas and electrical reports, all very sensible. There'll be more transparency for tenants. So the database could include enforcement history, allowing tenants to check a landlord's past compliance before choosing to rent from them. However, there's still no equivalent database for landlords to check tenant histories. So what's this all mean for landlords and tenants? Landlords face new registration costs, but some won't need to join the Ombudsman scheme if they already use a letting agent. Tenants may get more visibility into landlord records, who they're renting from, but landlords don't get the same protections against bad tenants. There'll be more admin and compliance costs, which could push small landlords out the market, reducing rental supply. Next is limits on the rent paid in advance. Many tenants pay rent upfront as a way to give themselves a competitive edge when renting, which is great for landlords. What was originally proposed was limits on how much rent can be paid upfront, so that it's not unfair for tenants that can't afford to pay many months up front. Some tenants offer 6, 12 months up front to secure a rental. That would no longer be allowed. So the potential problem with this is tenants used paying rent up front as a competitive edge, rather than, say, offering more rent per month. You could say, well, I'll pay more up front, more months up front. For landlords, it reduces risk. You get rent up front rather than worrying if a tenant will pay or not each month. What the House of Lords has changed is upfront rent payments will still be allowed, but with a cap. Tenants can still pay up to 12 months upfront if mutually agreed with the landlord. And finally, 7, stricter energy efficiency rules, so EPC ratings. The government wants all rental properties to hit an EPC rating of C or better by 2030, but most rental properties don't meet this standard today. What was originally proposed is all rental homes must meet EPC C or better by 2030. But 80% of rental homes are currently below this standard right now. And the average cost of upgrading a rental property to a C is over £9,000 per property. The problem is many landlords will sell rather than upgrade, reducing rental supply. Higher costs for landlords equal higher rents for tenants at the end of the day. What the House of Lords has changed is they've insisted more clarity on the implementation timescales of this. There will be stage deadlines for improvements rather than an immediate deadline, and government funding options for landlords are being explored, but nothing is concrete yet. So what's this mean for landlords and tenants? Landlords must start planning for EPC upgrades, but there may be phased deadlines instead of a sudden cut-off that landlords have to aim to. Government might introduce incentives or funding, but again, nothing is guaranteed yet. Expect higher rents as landlords ultimately pass the costs onto tenants with this. Final thoughts: is UK property investing doomed? The Renters' Rights Bill and 2025 policies in general are piling on costs and regulations, but not all landlords will lose out. Who will win? Well, big institutional landlords who can handle compliance easily, build to rent investors who operate at scale, cash buyers who can snap up properties when small landlords exit. And who loses? Small landlords who can't handle the extra costs and admin, tenants who face higher rents and fewer available homes to choose from. Do you think these policies will help tenants, or are they just pushing landlords out, or both? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next video up here.